pledge your flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Cynthia. As I said, today is Cynthia's first day in the chair as in her return to the city manager's position. Thank you, Cynthia, for jumping in to help us out during this important transition time. I'd like to recognize the passing of Senator Bob Dole, who was also a nominee and candidate for President of the United States. Senator Dole, as a veteran, had many contributions to our great country and lost his life this past week. As you all know, we have a flag procedure in place, and it's dictated in large part by the White House and consistent with a White House directive from President Biden. The flags will be flown at City Hall at half staff, and will do so commemorating the life of Senator Bob Dole through Thursday, December 9th. So thank you all. Next, we'll go to public comment from Mr. Kennedy.
Mayor and my colleagues, I had the good fortune of meeting with Senator Bob Dole in his office in the Rotunda at the U.S. Capitol. And anyone who says that he couldn't occasionally go into partisan hackery was mistaken. However, he always placed, in my view, needs of the American people ahead of his personal ambition. And he was willing to work with Democrats, and his best ideas were coming forth to get legislation passed that benefited a significant number of Americans. And as a former military man, he was one who understood the beauty of the diversity of our country. So I add my brief words with our mayor in celebrating the life of Robert Dole. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. We have quite a bit of public comment for matters not on the agenda. And so to be fair to the public and to allow the public who's tuned in for our agenda items, we're going to cut the time down to 1.5 minutes for all public speakers for matters not on the agenda. And again, this is intended to be fair to all speakers as well as to the public who reviews our agenda and signs on to participate in the council's meeting and deliberations related to the agenda items. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, to just read some words ahead of the public comment. Public comment will be limited to a total of 20 minutes at the beginning of the meeting and will continue at the conclusion of the meeting if necessary. Comments tonight are limited to 1.5 minutes. The City Council may not discuss or take action on issues not on the meeting agenda, except that members of the City Council or staff may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed by persons exercising public testimony rights. A member of the public shall only address the body and shall direct comments to the body as a whole and not the staff, individual members of the body, or the public. No person shall be permitted to interrupt members of the body, staff presentations, or members of the public while at the microphone. Any person making personal, impertinent, or slanderous remarks about members of the body, staff, or the public, or who shall become boisterous or threatening or personally abusive of the body, staff, or members of the public shall be asked to cease and desist such activity by the mayor or chair, and may be requested or required to leave the meeting in the event the behavior continues to disrupt the meeting proceedings. And with that, the first speaker is Bert Newton, followed by Jude Batista, followed by Hiram Cormier. And it's 1 minute and 30 seconds. Go ahead, Mr. Newton. Bert? Bert, we can't hear you. We'll go to the next speaker and we'll bring you back in. Bert, maybe something's going on with your audio. Jude Bautista, followed by Hiram Cormier Jr. Jude, go ahead.
Hello, Mayor.
1 minute and 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Hello, Mayor and City Council. My name is Jude Bautista. I have lived in Pasadena for my whole life, which is about 12 years. I'll start off by saying thank you for the 1,000 plus units of affordable housing in the pipeline. I support affordable housing because my family and I like to go out and give away food and talk to people who live outside. I want to make sure that there are housing units available for them that aren't too expensive when they start trying to look for jobs and find themselves homes. If we rezone church land, we could provide the much needed additional sites for affordable housing. As the Director of Planning, Mr. David Reyes, said there are not enough. Most churches are either not zoned for residential housing or are not at a high enough density to make affordable housing development financially viable, so rezoning needs to happen. Also, the rezoning of church land for affordable housing needs to be by right. If not, a lot of projects won't take place because nonprofit affordable housing developers won't be able to invest the time and money in pre-development due to the risk that it might be denied.
30 seconds.
If we rezone church land, those churches can build more affordable housing units on their land, giving the people that me and my family meet with every weekend a chance of a home that isn't unreasonably expensive. Thank you for your time and your commitment to housing justice for our community.
Thank you, Jude.
Next, we have Hiram Cormier Jr., followed by Alan Shea, and then we'll try Bert Newton again.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right. So for like the gazillionth week in a row, I'm calling you to fire the cops to kill Anthony McLean. You know, we say that all the time, and we've been crying for almost 18 months or so, and nothing has happened at all, and it's ridiculous. It's very disrespectful. If anything is disrespectful, it would be that. So I'm calling for you to fire those cops. As far as that settlement goes, you know, I read one article that you guys put out, or someone wrote about Gordo said we're ready to move on from this issue, but nobody can move on until justice is served. And really, the family will never be able to move on because they can't see their loved one no more. And that's a serious, serious matter. You know, loss is never easy, but especially when somebody is killed in the middle of the street like a dog.
30 seconds.
There's nothing about it. And really, you know, that you care, but if you cared, one of your constituents that you always talk about, you represent, was shot in the street and nobody did nothing about it, and you still don't do nothing about it. In fact, you get offended when people call y'all and tell you to make something happen towards justice on that. So no, y'all really are showing your cards, and I'm gonna keep pulling them too. So it's all good. Fire those cops, fire Perez. Cynthia, do your job too.
Thank you. Your time has expired.
Fuck Gordo.
We'll try Bert Newton again, see if we can get his comment in. Bert?
Hi, can you hear me?
Now we can. Great. Go ahead. Minute and a half.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Thank you for this opportunity to address you on very important matters. This time that we have to speak on matters not on the agenda is very valuable. It's the time that we, the people, get to have a voice and make arguments for what we believe is right. I know that it is not always easy to sit through, so thank you for listening. And I know that there is a process to get things agendized, and the things that we've been speaking about are in that process. But people keep showing up week after week to speak about these things, because if we don't, they might get forgotten. Rezoning church land for affordable housing was on track to be discussed a year ago, but it got delayed. Then it was going to be taken up by the Planning Commission this month. Now it's going to be taken up in January. Anthony McLean was shot well over a year ago, and the officer who shot him is still working for the Pasadena PD. I'm not as reflexively anti-police as a lot of my friends are. One of my brothers was a police officer for many years, and I don't always believe that videos tell the whole story, but this one is very clear. It shows a man being shot in the back as he's running away. It
30
could not be
seconds.
more clear. But we are here we are a year later. That's why people come back and others come for the first time week after week to plead for justice. Racist zoning began over 100 years ago. It is still with us. And I could say more, but my time is extremely limited this evening. So thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. We'll bring in Alan Shea, followed by Blair Miller, followed by Michael Williams. Alan? Are you able to?
Good afternoon.
There you go.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Good
can. Go
afternoon,
ahead.
Honorable Mayor Gordo and City Council members. As you know, all of us have been calling, asking for some action from the City Council, and there has been none as it relates to Anthony McLean. Clearly, you're going to put more pressure on the community to take action that is opposing your position as you stand, and you have not made any attempts to bring any kind of true justice as it relates to the police department. Clearly, if this is how the city is going to handle the police department, and we love our police department, but if the police department has done something outside of their codes, their performance, they should be held accountable, plain and simple. And it's up to you and the city council members, Mayor Gordo, to make sure
25 seconds.
this is clean. This will be no different than your own home. If you would allow your kids to go out and do something and they're not disciplined, then I'm sure your house will be in disarray. That is exactly what's happening with the city. It's becoming in disarray as it relates to the leadership here. So the city has been asking you, the community has been asking you to resolve this problem.
Mr. Shea, your time has expired.
City manager, please take heed to what is being presented by the community.
Thank you. Blair Miller, followed by Michael Williams, followed by Topher Mathers.
Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. Last week, 33-year-old Pasadena resident Yang Yang Liu was killed by a driver at the intersection of Allen Avenue and San Pasquale when she was out for a morning jog. I've been in touch with her husband, and he is beyond devastated. Yang was his soulmate. Pasadena's streets are unsafe for everyone, but especially for the most vulnerable people, those who are not surrounded by 3,000 pounds of metal and glass. We are not doing enough to make our streets safer. It's not just money, it is political will. The DOT staff have great ideas for safety features that would make our streets safer for everyone, but these projects are continuously delayed or reduced or eliminated due to people whose primary interest is in driving as quickly as possible and who hold outside political influence in our city.
30 seconds.
We need to change how we drive in Pasadena. And we need to start by showing people that driving as fast as possible is not our highest priority. As our community's leaders, we need to step up and put our safety first. And please, I do not ever want to have to talk to another devastated widower.
Mayor, if I might.
Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just want to remind the public that we did acknowledge the tragic loss of Yang Yang Liu at our meeting last week. My office, the incident at Allen and San Pasquale is in District 7, and I personally visited the site a number of times. And I know as we speak, the Department of Transportation has reevaluated the intersection. We'll continue to look to ways to make that intersection safer. And I've hosted conversations with a number of nearby neighbors and look forward to doing a neighborhood walk of that section of Allen to see if there are other traffic safety improvements that can be made in that section of Allen. So I wanted to share that with the public. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Michael.
Mayor, if you don't mind, I'm very grateful for Vice Mayor's comments. I was going to ask for comments at the end, and since he mentioned that, I was gonna bring up some ideas that were brought up through the emails that we've seen. The reduction of speed, I don't know if it's temporary or something that we could bring back as an item to discuss. Maybe public safety, or maybe the full city council needs to take on that idea, reduction of speed within our residential neighborhoods. And then, part of that is the enforcement. Do our traffic officers, do we have enough traffic officers? We need to beef that up? I would like to have that as a agenda item to come back to us.
Thank you, Mr. Hampton.
Thank you.
We'll move on to Michael Williams, followed by Topher Mathers. Anthony Manousos has a speaker card in, but is not yet in the meeting. Mr. Williams, go ahead. A minute and a half.
I just wanted to say that I don't really care if you acknowledge the people that are being killed here, because your acknowledgments mean nothing unless you're willing to do something about these things to make sure that these things do not keep happening. You keep saying that you're acknowledging these people and you want to acknowledge, but you don't do anything and anything in a quick manner to make sure that these things don't continue to happen. You don't try to stop police violence because you have multiple murderers on your police force, including the people who killed Anthony McLean. You don't do anything about community-based violence because you keep pumping money into police programs that have been proven not to work, and not put money into things that are community-based programs that are been known to prevent crime and prevent violence in our community. If you're going to say their names and say their names in a way that is proactive and making sure that their legacies are attached to
25 seconds.
And make a positive change to our community. If you're going to say their names, make sure that you're saying their names with the intention of making them the last names we have to call. Stop the grandstanding. Do the right thing, like many people have called you up to do over and over and over again.
Mr. Williams, your time has expired.
Anthony McLean.
Thank you. Topher Mathers, followed by Anthony Manousos, who's yet to check in, followed by Jason R. Topher?
Hello, Mayor Gordo and City Council members. Last week's tragic death of Yang Yang Lu was preventable. She was killed on her morning jog. She was trying to cross Allen Avenue at Tampa Swale near her home. This is the second pedestrian to have been killed on Allen Avenue this year. 80-year-old Miriam Castella was killed near her home by a driver at Las Lunas Street while on her morning walk earlier this year. Mrs. Lu's death marks the sixth person killed in a traffic collision while walking in Pasadena thus far this year. And that means 6 families will be celebrating the holidays without their loved ones. According to PPD records, pedestrians have only been involved in 6% of traffic collisions this year, but have made up 75% of traffic fatalities. There have been 915 traffic collisions in Pasadena this year, resulting in 55 injured pedestrians, 56 injured cyclists, and 495 injured drivers and passengers. This does not need to be this way. You can do more to make Pasadena streets safer for everyone.
30
every
seconds.
time you respect safety improvements, like the proposed safety improvements for Orange Grove Boulevard, or you water down traffic safety projects, you do a disservice to the victims of traffic violence and their families, and ensure there'll be future victims. Cities and countries around the world have implemented street safety improvements that reduce the number of injuries and severity of those injuries in the last 20 years. This track record of success recognizes that drivers make mistakes and focus on infrastructure with built-in safeguards for our streets by designing them for safety instead of speed. Pasadena streets are dangerous by design.
Mr. Mathers, your time has expired.
Our streets safe for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony Manousos, followed by Jason R., followed by Jonah Canner. *6 to unmute, Anthony. There you go. Go
Hello
ahead.
there. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can. Minute and a half. Go ahead.
Okay, wonderful. Well, first of all, I want to say that I really appreciate the patience of the city council members listening to us when we say the same things over and over again. But we feel like the widow in the parable of Jesus, that we just need to keep speaking out for justice and for the good of our community. And I know you care about the good of the community just as we do. So I want to say I really resonate with all the things that have been said tonight, particularly safe streets. I'm concerned, we are concerned about North Fair Oaks, where there's been a lot of traffic accidents, and we'd like to see some slowing of traffic in that area with the complete streets concept. And I also think we need to take serious action regarding police accountability. It's just disgraceful that the police who shot and killed Anthony McLean are still on the beat. That would never happen if they were teachers and they'd done something
25
as
seconds.
egregious as what we said. And also, I think we need to get agendized rezoning church land for affordable housing. This is an emergency, affordable housing. And this is something that really needs to get on the agenda ASAP and approved so churches can fulfill their mission and be of benefit to our community and address our housing crisis. Thank you very much for your patience, and I hope that this will make a difference.
Thank you. Jason R, followed by Jonah Canner, followed by Janee L.
All right, yeah. So yesterday while I drove through Pasadena, I saw a sign that said, "The community mourns Anthony McLean." So while this mayor and the city council may have moved on, the people in the community have not. You have community members calling each and every week to speak on the lack of justice there has been in the name of Anthony McLean. And I'll repeat for the record, there are now 7.5 million reasons why the officers who murdered Anthony McLean should be fired immediately. Why is this city so invested in protecting and defending Edmund DeMcGuinden, a murderer? What is the benefit of covering up the faults of this police department? How does that benefit the community? You have sanitized the violence of the police department, of the Pasadena Police Department for too long. You allowed Steve Ramel to retire without doing what he had the power to do, which was fire these officers. What this council can do is put public pressure on whoever is chosen to fill the city manager position to take the first step in getting some semblance of justice in Anthony McLean's name. Cynthia Kurtz, as interim city manager, you can start to get those wheels in motion for the termination of these officers.
30 seconds.
Anthony McLean lives on through his children, through his family, through his community, and through us. And finally, I'll say it's great to see the city of Pasadena showing love to Bob Dole, a racist, a homophobe, and a self-professed Trumper. Fuck all y'all.
Jonah Canner, followed by Janee L. Janae L.
Hi, good evening. Can I be heard?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Mayor Gordo and City Council. I'm speaking tonight out of concern for street safety in Pasadena. As you know, last week there was a tragic collision at the intersection of Allen and San Pasqual where a 33-year-old woman was struck and killed by the driver of a fast-moving SUV. This happened in a neighborhood where I used to live and at an intersection that was part of my daily jog for 4 years. This type of horrific violence is not an accident, and it's not unique. Instead, these collisions are the predictable result of street design that prioritizes high-speed traffic and puts a low premium on human health and life. This year alone, there have been 8 fatalities due to traffic violence, and this is the second death just on Allen. This is part of a larger pattern of dangerous and costly collisions, of which over 900 have been reported to Pasadena police this year. Other cities around the world have adopted Vision Zero principles and
30
demonstrated
seconds.
that high rates of traffic deaths are a choice. For example, the city of Oslo has reduced the rate of traffic deaths to less than 1 per year. This is a per capita traffic death rate 25 times lower than Pasadena, suggesting these fatalities are 95% preventable. In the coming months and years, I ask that City Council and DOT choose street designs that prioritize safety and so protect residents and property value by preventing collisions. Thank you for the time and for all the work you do for our city.
Thank you. Janae L, followed by Heavenly Hughes, followed by Victor Hodson. Janae?
Hello. Like my comrades, I am calling to demand you guys fire the officers who have killed Anthony McLean. It is going beyond a year, and there has clearly been evidence of biases on your part. Anthony McLean deserves to be with his family during this holiday season, but he can't because rogue officers decided to murder him with seconds behind his back, which is absurd. I don't know how you can be so freaking scared of people running away from you. Like, if you're so incompetent that like you need to shoot before even a second question, you probably shouldn't have this fucking job, to be quite honest. But time and time again, we're calling you guys, and you guys continue to do nothing. So for me, it's showing that you guys also don't deserve to have these jobs as well. It's time for you guys to also pack up and leave too, because it clearly your ability to not
30 seconds.
the minimum is letting us know that you're incompetent. So please pack up your stuff and go. And so we can put people who actually believe and care about their community, because it's clear that you guys do not. So resign, put your letters in, we'll all take it willingly. Every last one of you.
Thank you. Heavenly Hughes, followed by Victor Hodson. Ms. Hughes?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead. 1 minute, 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
Good. How are
to hear
you?
you. Good. Hello, Mayor Victor Gordo. How are you?
Doing well, Heavenly. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad to see that we have Cynthia Kurtz. Hello, Cynthia. I'm glad you are here. We needed a breath of fresh air, and we appreciate you being here. We look forward to sitting down with you, Cynthia, and talking about police accountability and how we can have better community engagement from the city of Pasadena, the Pasadena police in the community. So we really look forward to having you. So Cynthia, just so you can know a little bit more about who I am, my name is Heavenly Hughes. I'm one of the co-founders of My Tribe Rise. And first on our focus is police accountability. A lot of times people think that we are a hate group against the police, but we don't hate the police at all.
25 seconds.
We believe that the police should be held accountable. And Cynthia Kirk, we look forward to understanding if you're in that same space with us, of believing that those within the city employees, particularly we're focused on the police department being held accountable, especially for the murder of Anthony McLean. We ask right now that we take a moment of silence in his name, as we've done for others today.
Ms. Hughes, your time has expired. Victor Hodson. Mr. Hodson, can you unmute? We'll move on to Kat Ross and come back to Victor at some point.
All right, there I go.
Oh, there you go. There you go. You're good. Go ahead. 1 minute, 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I want to also continue with a moment of silence for those that have passed on, such as Anthony McLean, George Floyd, and many others. City Council, we are here again on another Monday. We still haven't seen a lot that has been done in regards to holding Edwin Dumagwindon accountable. He needs to be fired. We're here every week. Something has to happen. We have to see change. You know, the Bible speaks about wars and rumors of wars and pestilence. And we can see some of these things are happening now. Some of these things must come to pass. This is a fight against good and evil. Pasadena City Council, what side are you going to stand on, good or the evil? Because that's where we're fighting principalities, not only amongst ourselves. So do the right thing. Let's
30
do the right
seconds.
thing. Let's put our heads together and let's get Edwin Dumagwindon out of there. He should not be policing Pasadena anymore after he killed Anthony McLean. Thank you for my time.
Thank you. We'll bring in Kat Ross as the last speaker in the initial 20 minutes. Ms. Ross, minute 30 seconds, go ahead.
Surely we can agree that shooting someone in the back while running away is not an example of the kind of public safety we strive for in Pasadena. Let's hold officers accountable when they do wrong, so that the community can be more trusting of the service that they provide for the rest of the time. Change the officer-involved shooting policy to wrap up administrative reviews of officers within 9 months of the incident. Chief Perez says 9 months is the longest time it could take to gather all of the evidence and finish their case. So let's make that the amount of time that it takes for an administrative review to be conducted. Stop handcuffing mortally wounded suspects. Stop shooting people fleeing in the back. Increase the retroactive recording time of body-worn cameras from 30 seconds to 2 minutes. Stop pulling over motorists for minor infractions.
30
They
seconds.
keep causing people to die. Let's not have any of the rest of our community be killed accidentally or unintentionally or inappropriately by police. Reforms are needed. Let's make those reforms and changes now so that we can all move on together as a community.
Thank you. That completes the initial 20 minutes for public comment. Jasmine Richards Abdullah, Adriana Batista, Karina K, Sheila, Carolyn Galoni, Julia R, Simboa Wright, Eddie Portillo, Kyle Johnson, Gary Peters, Jose Munoz, and Julie Martinez are still in the queue. Julie Martinez will be the last public comment speaker on matters not on the agenda for tonight's meeting.
Thank you, Mr. City Clerk. That brings us to the consent calendar. And before we take on the consent calendar, Mr. Kennedy?
Mayor,
Yes.
my hand was up.
Oh, okay.
A very quick question.
Please.
Councilmember Hampton had raised bringing the calming of traffic to public safety. Is that the right place, you think, where we could
I think so.
have a great discussion about it?
I think so. I think public safety is the appropriate venue for that.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor, I just ask, we do look at a lot of the transportation elements also in MSC, so that may be an option as well. So I would defer to your guidance on that.
I think we can bifurcate the issue of infrastructure versus enforcement and policing. Infrastructure probably does belong with MSC. The issue of enforcement and policing belongs at public safety. And so I'll look to the city manager to provide some guidance on these issues.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
I move the consent calendar.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Yes.
Mayor,
Mr.
I
Hampton?
just wanted to briefly, and I'm gonna be very brief because you guys have already heard this multiple times. It has been over a year as it relates to the administrative review for the officer who shot Anthony McClain in the back twice. I do not think that a person needs to be a criminal to retain their job or to be fired. So I want to know, are we still on target for January to have the discussion about the administrative reviews for guidance for our city manager? Hello?
I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the city attorney, Mr. Hampton.
No worries.
Yeah, I think January for the matter to, the matter went to public safety and then to come to the full council in January. Yes.
They're supposed to come to the full council in January.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Is January still?
Yes.
I just want to make sure that's still the timeline. Thank you.
Towards the end.
And also to the city attorney, have we found out anything more related to their investigation in the district attorney's office?
No.
Is there any brief update?
There is
you
no
can
update.
provide?
Oh, I'm sorry.
None?
There is nothing new to report. I did inquire and there is nothing further.
not even the possibility of when our community may find out the result?
No.
Thank you very much.
And that's the reason why it is not our job to wait upon the district attorney to do the job of our administrators. So it is important that our administrators follow the policies that we have in place. And that's the reason why I've been asking for this to come back to us. Accountability is key. We're going to continue to get these public comments if we're not having that real discussion, and also for the officer involved, any officer involved in any infraction, anything, they should know exactly where they stand, and they shouldn't have to wait around a whole year to see if they're going to be terminated or not. So thank you.
Thank you. The consent calendar has been moved by Mr. Madison. Is there a second?
Mayor, I had two very quick questions just on item 2 and 5. I don't need a presentation. I just had a quick question for staff.
Go ahead, Vice Mayor Wilson. Then I have a statement to read.
And then we have public comment on item 1, and I have some correspondence to read for item 1.
Mayor, I'll second the rest.
Okay. Mr. Wilson?
Yeah, so item 2, just the staff. I was curious. I thought I was under the impression that Pasadena Beautiful subsidized the larger box size for trees. I just wanted to have some clarity. I'm certainly more than fine with this item, but I just wanted to make sure if that was no longer the case, or if it was, that had been contemplated here on the trees.
Sorry about that. Good evening, Mayor, City Council, Tony Olmos, Public Works Director. I'm going to ask if our staff has that answer. I think the question is whether Pasadena, sorry about that, provided some funding for that?
Yeah, I was under the impression Pasadena Beautiful, maybe this is something they haven't done for a while, but at one point they were providing incremental funding to allow the city to kind of upsize the trees that were planted in the public right away.
Good evening. Can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Eric Marzine, Public Works Administrator, Street Maintenance Division. Yes, to answer your question, Mr. Vice Mayor, we do still work in conjunction with Pasadena Beautiful.
Okay, and do they provide some subsidy or some support to allow for bigger tree sizes, and is that contemplated in this funding?
To my knowledge, and I can confirm with my staff and then get back to you, they do the 36-inch box trees. That's always been kind of their intent, to go with the larger box trees.
So
okay, that's fine.
Okay.
And we work in conjunction with them as far as, they give us a list of locations where they're going to be providing, and then, so basically their work is supplementing the work that we do.
Okay, they buy trees separately, and they plant some trees that are in addition to the ones that are contemplated under this action.
Correct.
Okay, okay. I just want to make sure that we're continuing to orchestrate with them. And I had a question on number 5. That was it for number 2. I'm prepared to move item 2 at the appropriate time.
Okay. Why don't you go ahead and ask your question on item 5, and the clerk has some public comment for item 1.
Okay, fair enough. I think this is from Philip. I don't know if Philip's in the room.
He is.
Here he is.
Hi, Philip. Is he in a place where I could ask the question?
Yes, Councilmember Wilson, I'm here.
Okay, sorry, I can't. You're a little tiny box on my screen. So this is the installation of video conferencing technology solutions. I know this used to be kind of installing proprietary video conferencing technology used to be kind of the way kind of remote meetings were being held. I'm just wondering, with the ubiquity of Zoom, is it still necessary for us to be investing in kind of proprietary technology for video conferencing? I'm just wondering how that fits in and whether that is still required.
What this contract is for is to help install permanent video cameras and other technologies that will allow laptops and other equipment to plug into the new types of technologies that are required by Zoom and everyone else. So we're not trying to block any of our conference rooms to be just within one proprietary technology. It'll allow anyone, a vendor, the public, or staff members, depending what rooms they are, allowed to connect into the cameras and the video AV technology in the room to help facilitate those meetings.
Okay, so your position is that this leverages the
Hardware.
Zoom infrastructure, and obviously the public and many people are very comfortable with that technology. This is not some sort of, this is to say augmenting that technology versus competing with technology, or I guess we use Microsoft Teams as well. Is
Yes,
that correct?
exactly, council member. This isn't going to block us in any way. This is actually just going to help support our continued use of the video technologies that we have been accustomed to the last 2 years.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm also prepared to do that item as well at the right time, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Let's turn to public comment. Mr. Clerk.
Sonia Burnt, followed by Bert Newton, followed by Anthony Manusos. And before we bring in Ms. Burnt, I would just report that the city clerk's office received one letter for item number 1, advocating for assistance for unsheltered residents and urging the city to rapidly seek viable solutions, such as providing interim tiny shelter villages and repurposing motels. That correspondence was posted online, distributed to the council, and is part of the public record. It's minute and a half for this item. Okay. Let's bring in Sonia.
Ms. Burnt.
Ms. Burnt, go ahead. You have a minute and a half. Go ahead.
Good evening. While I do not oppose adding $108,000 to the city's contract with Friends Indeed to administer motel-based emergency shelter services, this tiny amount is far too little to provide ongoing shelter for our nearly 300 residents who sleep on the street every night, waiting up to a year for permanent housing. Our city's motel voucher program reportedly costs approximately $100 per room per night, not including services. Thus, the Friends Indeed contract for $158,000 provides less than 32 nights for just 50 of our unsheltered residents, not including services. And the vouchers do not allow for any reuse for any other unsheltered persons. The city must have a smarter, more cost-effective strategy for sheltering our nearly 300 unsheltered residents. Cities throughout the state are participating in California's Homekey program, which provides substantial grants to local jurisdictions to purchase and remodel motels, hotels, et cetera, for use as interim housing.
25
The cost per
seconds.
unit in a Homekey room is approximately $87, including 24/7 support services, food service, et cetera, and the rooms can be used by others as clients find permanent housing. Please direct staff to urgently find ways to participate in the state's second round of Homekey funding, which is now open. Additionally, please agendize this issue of creating a tiny home village in our city. I've submitted a detailed letter to the Ed Tech Committee, which will be discussing the issue of the unmet needs of our unsheltered neighbors this coming Wednesday. I look forward to that discussion and hopefully a recognition that we need a much better plan on an urgent basis for providing shelter and intensive case management services for our unsheltered neighbors as they wait up to a year
Ms.
for permanent housing.
Ms. Burnt,
Thank
your time has expired. Thank you. Bert Newton, followed by Anthony Manusos.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and City Council. I want to also urge Pasadena's participation in the second round of funding for Project Homekey. Our city has done a great job of working with Union Station Homeless Services, Friends Indeed, and other service providers to provide shelter for those living on our streets. Unfortunately, these shelters and services have not been sufficient to provide shelter for everyone who needs it. Furthermore, congregate shelters are limited in their usefulness, not only during a pandemic, but even during normal times. I worked as a case manager for 15 years in a program serving people who were often homeless. Many of them were hesitant and often turned down shelter beds for multiple reasons, which made sense when I saw it from their perspective. The number one reason that I heard for turning down a shelter bed was that shelters were a good place to catch a bug and get sick. And being sick when homeless is very, very difficult. On the other hand, I never had anyone turn down a motel room. Motel rooms provide privacy and therefore dignity, and also more safety from illness. Project Homekey provides an opportunity for us to buy motels and convert them into interim housing
which will eventually become permanent housing.
25
Right now,
seconds.
providing motel vouchers is the primary way that we are getting people off the street, but this method is very expensive. Once a voucher is used, it is gone, money is spent. Due to this expense, recipients often get limited stays in motels and there are not enough vouchers to cover everyone. So most people living on the street stay on the street. Whereas if we buy motels or build tiny home villages, we will have rooms to use over and over, and people can stay as long as it takes to get permanent housing. We need to participate in the second round of Project Homekey funding if we're going to shelter everyone who needs shelter. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anthony Manousos. *6. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gordo, City Council members. I would like to echo what's been said by the previous two speakers. I know that all of us care deeply about our homeless neighbors. Their situation is really dire, not only because of weather, but because of COVID and other factors. And it's just unconscionable that we have so many people who are living on the streets when we have other people who are paying over $1 million for a home in this city. We really need to do everything, our utmost, to ensure that every single person who's chronically homeless in our city has a home. So I hope you will direct the staff to take the measures that have been suggested and apply for home key funding, and also to consider alternatives that
30
may not be
seconds.
popular but may be necessary, such as tiny shelters, which provide individual housing for people who are experiencing homelessness and can be a good form of bridge housing. So please do your utmost to ensure that all our homeless neighbors have a chance to get housed this year.
Thank you. That completes public comment on the consent.
Mayor,
Hold on a second, Mr. Kennedy. We have a response from Cynthia Kurtz.
I just wanted to very quickly let the council know that the Homekey program is a great program. And I know that the housing department here has looked into a number of projects, has even made offers on hotels and tried to connect it's especially with the second round of funding out, will continue to do so. It's something though that takes a willing participant in someone that will sell a motel, and it's not always easy to find. But with the last three speakers, I agree with you 100%. It's an important program. It would be great if we could find some long-term individual housing that would help with our homeless program. And if anyone else finds motels that they know are for sale, please be in touch with us. We are eager to participate in that program.
Thank you, Cynthia. Mr. Kennedy?
Mayor, my question is for Bill Wong.
He's just coming into the room
No.
now.
Go ahead, Mr. Kennedy.
Our Director of Housing.
He's here now.
Bill,
Go ahead.
I'd like to know if there are immediate plans to participate, go after the second round of funds for Project Homekey.
As Interim City Manager Cynthia Kurtz mentioned, the biggest barrier, there are a couple big barriers, but the biggest barrier is the willingness of a motel owner to sell. We did submit, and there was an application that was submitted in the first round, but it fell out because the property owner was trying to get significantly higher than appraised value for their motel. And so that application had to be withdrawn. And in the second round, we, our real estate broker, several affordable housing developers have been looking and trying to find a motel. None have been able to do so. And then the other issue is, as one of the speakers mentioned, the concept behind Project Homekey is that it would start off as interim housing, but then be converted to permanent supportive housing. And because we have been so active in project basing our vouchers, we don't have project-based vouchers for that conversion. So currently, we don't have any way to make that conversion if we were to be able to acquire a site.
And just to be clear, to follow up on the city manager's comments, from her statement, it seems like you have to have a building at least under contract be successful. Is that accurate?
Yes, that is correct.
And then my second question is to the city manager. I think some of the comments of the speakers on this issue were brought to us out of abundance of love and care for those who are without a home. And $108,000 is not a paltry sum, but it is a sum that, for the cost of housing in Pasadena, has a small impact. So I'd like to know, Mrs. City Manager Cynthia Kurtz, if you're willing to go back and to the diagram, to the blackboard, and just see if there are funds that may be made available for the same purpose as agenda item 1. I'm not asking you to solve it tonight. I'm just asking for a sincere commitment. Go back and review the possibilities and share.
Councilmember Kennedy, thank you. It's a very fair question. And actually, Mr. Wong probably can give you the more specifics, but this is the first of 2 contracts intended to make motels available, since we do not have a shelter that we can open for the winter. But there's another contract that's being prepared with Union Station. And I don't remember the specifics of the number and so on, but we could that will be before you in January. So we already are intending to bring more resources to bear. And before I turn it over to Mr. Wong, let me just say, if depending on the weather this winter and where we find ourselves and how how quickly these vouchers go, I think it's very fair to ask that we continue to look for additional resources from whatever sources we can.
Thank you, Ms.
Bill,
Kurtz.
did you want?
Okay, thank you. Moving on, see Mr. Hampton's hand maybe up. Mr. Hampton, do you have a brief statement?
Yeah, I was going to mention it on the same lines as Councilmember Kennedy, looking for other dollars that we could use to support our families and friends and neighbors in need, especially during these colder nights. It is actually outside of people sleeping on the street, it is actually a public safety concern because there are a lot of fires that are started because of people just trying to stay warm. And so I just hope that we're able to look for other dollars. And then I have one question. And this question is for Bill Wong. When looking for hotels, where are you looking? Are you looking in Pasadena?
Yes, for Project Roomkey, for Project Roomkey projects, that would be to acquire, that would be in Pasadena. There are 17 motels, hotels that are eligible under our motel conversion ordinance. So we're specifically looking at those 17.
And so we can use our dollars outside of the city of Pasadena. Is that correct?
Only only one source that I'm aware of, which is our home funds. Home funds could be transferred to an physically adjacent jurisdiction if they would agree to it. And in the past, we have jointly funded one project, a permanent supportive housing project with the city of Glendale here in Pasadena. That's the Euclid Villa project. And they transferred some of their home dollars into Pasadena to be paired up with ours.
And so I bring that up because I've brought this up multiple times, and I understand that sometimes it's hard looking for properties, but I know that your department is on top of all of these things, and I think that we're all very appreciative of what the housing department does. But I hope that you're still looking to partner with other cities like Glendale or Arcadia, et cetera, to produce these type of housing developments that would be helpful for not only our residents and neighbors, but also those that we'd be partnering with. So I know that we look for properties in Pasadena, and sometimes there's not anything available, but maybe there's something available in Altadena, maybe there's something available in Arcadia. I just don't want our focus to be narrow to just looking at Pasadena. This is a really big issue, and we have to do all we can to partner. And I know that your department does that. I just want to reiterate that I'm supportive of it.
We have been discussing with one developer who is likely to submit an application for the Project Roomkey, second round of Project Roomkey for a motel in East Pasadena.
Great. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Bill. We still have significant public comments associated with matters on the agenda and not on the agenda. And so let's take up the consent calendar. Before we do that, I'm going to read a statement into the record, and this is related to item 7. As required by the Brown Act, prior to taking action on item 7 regarding the city clerk's compensation, this is to announce the recommendation that the city clerk receive an approximate 7% annual salary adjustment and one-time 5% management incentive payment. The city clerk's last pay adjustment was 3 years ago, and he has not received any cost of living adjustment during that time. The city clerk will continue making a 10% employee paid PERS pension contribution. With that, we have a motion and I believe a second on the consent calendar, and I'll call for the roll.
Councilmember Hampton,
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Yes.
Councilmember Madison,
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda,
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas,
Yes.
Councilmember Williams is absent. Vice Mayor Wilson,
Yes.
Mayor Gordo.
Yes.
The motion is approved without opposition.
Thank you. This brings us to, and we do have significant public comment for item 12, but this will bring us to item 10. This is a public hearing
and this is
on redistricting.
Right, and this is item 10 and 13 together. There's a first reading of the ordinance contemplated. Mayor and Council, Mark Johnski, City Clerk, we have before us the continued public hearing for the redistricting, the recommended redistricting plan by the redistricting task force. I will just announce out the correspondence received. The City Clerk's office received 27 letters from one individual advocating for various communities of interest and speaking on language requirements for city elections. The correspondence has been posted online, distributed to the council, and is part of the public hearing record for the redistricting public hearing. PowerPoint.
Okay.
I just have a quick PowerPoint that's just a few slides. We also have David Ely here, who's part of the technical staff and has been the lead staff person on our redistricting effort, working with National Demographics Corporation and Douglas Johnson and Kristen Parks. Just to highlight where we are in the process, we've completed a number of public hearings that we've reviewed with the council on November 15th with the task force, and here at the city council's level, we have completed 2 of the public hearings. With tonight, we are scheduled to close this last third public hearing once public comment has been received. We currently have no speaker cards for this item. So at this point, it would be receive and file the correspondence, close the public hearing, and approve the staff recommendation and conduct first reading of the ordinance. Next week, we'll have second reading of the ordinance. Upon adoption, the city clerk's office will work with the registrar recorder county clerk's office to implement the new boundaries. So under the 5th recommendation, to close the public hearing, approve the redistricting task force recommendation, and conduct first reading of the ordinance. And these would be the motions that the council could take to complete this process.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Is there such a motion?
Yeah, I'll make it. Second.
Moved by Councilmember Masuda, seconded by Vice Mayor Wilson. Roll call.
To close the public hearing, Councilmember Hampton,
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Yes.
Councilmember Madison,
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda,
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas,
Yes.
Councilmember Williams is absent. Vice Mayor Wilson,
Yes.
Mayor Gordo.
Yes. And on the merits, to receive and file the report and also conduct the first reading of the ordinance.
Just the staff recommendation, which would be the CEQA finding as well. So and then we'll do a separate
you.
motion for the ordinance. So on the on the task force recommendation, I should say.
So move.
Moved by Councilmember Kennedy,
Second by Mr. Masuda.
Mr. Masuda. Councilmember Hampton? To approve the task force's recommendation?
Yes, yes.
Councilmember Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilmember Madison?
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda?
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas?
Yes.
Councilmember Williams is absent. Vice Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Mayor Gordo?
Yes.
The
And,
motion is approved without opposition.
and is there does somebody wish to offer the ordinance for first reading?
I'll offer, Mayor.
Mr. Masuda offers.
This is an ordinance of the City of Pasadena amending Title I, Chapter 1.20, Election Districts in Parens of the Pasadena Municipal Code. To conduct first reading, Councilmember Hampton.
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy.
Yes.
Councilmember Madison.
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda.
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas.
Yes.
Councilmember Williams is absent. Vice Mayor Wilson.
Yes.
Mayor Gordo.
Yes.
Motion is approved without opposition and the ordinance is conducted for first reading.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next matter also involves an ordinance, and this is an interim urgency ordinance. So we're going to take up item 11 and 14 together. This is a matter that's been heavily discussed among the council and in the community. Involves SB 9, and the staff was asked to put together an interim urgency ordinance and have it in place by January 1st in order to try and mitigate some of the impacts of the state imposed legislation. Ms. Kurtz?
I'd like to just say a few things before we turn it over to the planning staff that does have a presentation that I think the council does need to hear this evening, even though you have had many discussions about SB 9. Over the weekend, we began to hear that people were defining our ordinance as trying to undermine SB 9, and that is not our intent at all. While doing land use planning and zoning at the state level may not be the best public policy, and certainly is not the way Pasadena has always done it, where there's ample public involvement and a chance for people to be a part of what our city is going to look like and feel like. This rule is really to make sure we implement SB 9 in a way that's consistent with our existing city rules. And that's the intent. You will hear from the staff how they have gone through that process. And there were also some communications we heard that if we do not adopt this urgency ordinance, then SB 9 will not apply to us. That is not the case either. If we do not bring it into consistency with our underlying zoning rules, then the state's rules will apply. And so we will have two parallel systems of zoning that will be even more confusing than what we find our zoning already. And so I just wanted to clarify those before I turned it over to David Reyes, our planning director, who will walk through the intent of the ordinance and then the recommendation that we have before the council this evening and the first reading of the ordinance.
Thank you, Ms. Kurtz. Mr. Reyes?
Mayor, council members, I do have a brief intro and I'll turn it over to one of our planners, Mr. Martin Potter. As Ms. Kurtz indicated, what's before you this evening is a proposed interim emergency ordinance with regulations consistent with SB 9. But I think it's really important, just as a very brief background on this matter, that we would share with the council. If the presentation could come up just for a moment, please. Thank you very much. Because before we talk about SB 9, I think it's really important that we talk about some things that we've talked about in this chamber before, and that's that the city council has acknowledged the state's housing crisis. It's not a secret. We do have an issue with supply in the state, and we have an issue with rent, and we have an issue with affordability. And we've talked about that. And the city of Pasadena actually acknowledges that with respect to what our land use planning is. In fact, you just took up an item moments ago to address some issues related to homelessness and how the city might help in terms of actually providing resources. Well, previously and in the very recent past, the city council has introduced many policies related to the increase in the production of affordable housing. Some of these are on the screen before you: inclusionary housing. Our in lieu fee programs have been increased throughout the city. The funding for affordable housing has been ongoing. We've established a local menu for affordable housing. We have an ordinance that allows the conversion of hotels to affordable housing. That's an ordinance that we adopted, that this council adopted in the last 3 years. We also allow micro units. A big one that gained some notoriety actually at the state level, what was published this morning, was a project at 200 North Oakland, which is over 200 affordable micro units. And that's based on this last ordinance that's on the screen. That's something that the council also adopted in the last 3 years. We have over 1,000 units in the housing pipeline that are all affordable at some level. So in the context of planning for affordable housing, the city takes its role very seriously. And as mentioned by the city manager, Ms. Kurtz, we have something that we must deal with because the state has preempted our local control with SB 9. It's no secret that 240 cities opposed SB 9 when it came out. What's, again, before you this evening is not an attempt to do an end run around SB 9. It's actually very consistent with the rules and regulations contained within SB 9. And we have a very brief, Mayor, a very brief presentation. Just to go through what's being presented this evening, we've got about 9 or 10 slides, and Mr. Martin Potter will present what's on the table this evening, sir.
Mr. Potter.
Good evening, Mayor Gordo, members of the council. So I'll do a brief walkthrough of what Senate Bill 9 is. Senate Bill 9, which was introduced earlier this year, or approved earlier this year, requires ministerial approval of duplexes and urban lot splits. Oh, it's my microphone? Oh, sorry. How's that? There we go. All right, start over. So Senate Bill 9 requires ministerial approval of duplexes and urban lot splits in single-family residential zones, which results in at least 4 units on an existing property. Senate Bill 9 exempts historic landmarks, sites within a historic district, and sites that are on the state's historic resources inventory from the provisions. Pursuant to SB 9, an applicant could not alter or demolish deed-restricted affordable housing or rent-controlled housing, and limited alterations for housing occupied by a tenant in the last 3 years would be allowed. On the city side, the city may only impose objective standards as long as those standards don't preclude the possibility of 2 units of at least 800 square feet each. The city may require 1 parking space per new unit, unless those new units are within a half a mile of a high-quality transit corridor. The city may impose up to 4 feet side and rear setbacks, and units cannot be used for short-term rentals, which would be less than 30 days. If an urban lot split is used, the owner occupant, or the city would require an owner occupancy affidavit specifying their intent to live in one of the units for at least 3 years. An urban lot split must result in 2 approximately equal-sized lots, the maximum being a 60-40 split. Each of those new lots must be at least 1,200 square feet. Only 1 lot split is allowed, so there are no subsequent splits that could occur in the future. And the same owner or any person acting in concert with that owner cannot split adjacent lots. There we go. So in terms of objective standards, a maximum of 4 units would be allowed per existing lot. All new development shall comply with the existing RS zone standards. If a proposed development does not comply with those standards, then properties would be allowed to have a maximum unit size of 800 square feet per new unit, as well as a 1-story height limit. All new duplex units shall comply with the proposed standards unless they prevent the construction of 2 800 square foot units per lot, in which case a garden area would be required, which is similar to our existing City of Gardens standards, as well as the retention of at least 2 existing trees on site or the planting of 2 new trees. In terms of the requirements for urgency ordinance, an urgency ordinance may be passed by the City Council. It would last for an initial 45-day period without public noticing. With public noticing and a hearing, the ordinance can be extended twice. once for an additional 10 months and 15 days, and then subsequently for an additional year. So with both of those extensions, the urgency ordinance would last for a maximum of 2 years, and no more than 2 extensions are allowed under the government code. So staff's recommendation is that the City Council finds that the municipal code amendments are exempt from environmental review pursuant to the provisions in Senate Bill 9, which explicitly state that an ordinance adopted by a local agency to implement such provisions are not considered a project under Division 13 of the Public Resources Code, and State CEQA Guidelines Section 15738, which is not a project, and 15301 pertaining to existing facilities, as well as 15303 related to the new construction or conversion of small structures. Staff also recommends that the council adopt an interim urgency ordinance for single-family residential zone properties pertaining to development standards for the construction of multiple primary dwellings, aka duplexes, pursuant to Senate Bill 9. That concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
And Mayor, I would just add that we did go to both the Planning Commission and the Urban Forestry Advisory Committee to talk about the ordinance and to talk about the bill. It's our intent that if this ordinance is adopted this evening, that during the period while we're developing a permanent ordinance, we would look at additional standards and requirements, including some affordability requirements that may or may not be needed. We'll also be looking at open space requirements. This is a brand new bill for us, and so we want to make sure that we understand what the implications of this ordinance would be. And so it will take us a little bit of time before we are able to come back before this body.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. Why don't we have the city clerk report out on
Correspondence received.
correspondence?
For item 11 and item 14, some of it's for item 11, some of it's for item 14. The city clerk's office received 43 letters in support of the interim urgency ordinance and/or opposition to SB 9 and its impact on city neighborhoods. And 2 letters were received advocating for the creation of a Madison Heights Historic Landmark District. We also received 1 letter providing comments in support of SB 9, stating that the fears that SB 9 are stating that fears about SB 9 are greatly exaggerated. That correspondence was posted online, distributed to the council, and is part of this record for this item.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Now on the merits as it relates to the ordinance, does somebody wish to offer? Mr. Madison?
I'll offer.
Offered by Mr. Hampton. Mr. Madison, was your hand up?
Just for some comments, Mayor, not
Go ahead.
much
Mr.
talk. So, Mayor, I guess I am one of those. I'm hearing a loud echo.
We're okay, but
We don't hear the echo, but
Okay. It's still there. I don't know if everyone else should mute. In any event, I did not speak to the city manager about this, but I guess I am one of those who's concerned. We need to do something about the echo. I'm sorry.
Mr. Madison, it might be you, and we might need you to maybe log off and then log back in. There's a couple more hands raised by council members, so maybe if we do that, while you do that, we can let you come back in, because that might be on your side.
Okay. Have you been hearing an echo when I?
Not at all.
not on our end, Steve.
Okay, I'll log off and you can go to the next speaker. Mayor.
Steve, hold on. Am I echoing as well? Yeah, I'm echoing as well.
Oh,
It's on the it's in the council chamber, guys.
sorry about that.
Sorry, Steve, I didn't want you to be punched out if you would have dropped in the call, but you're not the issue.
Mr. Kennedy, do you hear an echo when you speak? Sorry about the.
Hello?
You hear the echo now? The echo went away. Echo's gone.
All right,
Okay.
the echo's gone. We just need
The
Mr.
echo goes
Kennedy
away.
to do it. All right.
Thank you.
John, you scared the echo away. Good job.
So but I guess I am one of those that's concerned about whether the language of the ordinance is unnecessarily inflammatory. And the issue, I think, is in the whereases. And to be clear, I join those who believe that there should be local control of zoning. Pasadena, and I've spoken about this previously, so I won't go on about it, but Pasadena is a model of a municipality that is committed to having a diverse economically and demographically community. We have a great planning director, a great housing director. We work extremely hard to cite and approve and require through our ordinances, and to actually own and operate increasingly ourselves, directly or indirectly through the joint powers authorities, for example, affordable housing. In my district alone, we recently converted 900 units to workforce housing, including something approaching 100 of very low income housing. So we're a model, and I agree that zoning and pursuit of those policies is best left in the hands of local officials and decision makers. Having said that, SB 9 is the state law, and the specific problems I have with the ordinance are in some of the whereas. So, for example, I'd like to hear staff's view if it differs from mine, but I don't see the necessity of including, for example, in the whereases, the second and third whereases at all, where we essentially recount the history that we had opposing SB 9. We did oppose it. Our objections were noted and ultimately rejected by the legislature and the governor. And I'm not sure that it behooves us to recount that here. And we do so very pointedly at the end of each paragraph by saying that in the first the second whereas, the first one that I'm raising, that SB 9 as enacted does not address the concerns of the city of Pasadena. I don't really see the reason to include that at this point. Similarly, the concerns of the league in the next whereas. And then in the fourth whereas on page 3, I would strike the last sentence of that paragraph, the one that says Pasadena is in the position of being forced to quickly address the numerous shortcomings of SB 9. I think that is understandably going to rub decision makers in Sacramento the wrong way and create the impression that Pasadena is a community that's not committed to having diversity in housing and affordable housing and the like, and we are, and that would be a real shame. And then the sixth whereas at the bottom beginning at the bottom of page 3 has some language about SB 9 undermining our initiatives to have a diverse mix of housing. And I think that's gratuitous and not necessary. And I don't need to remind, my colleagues, I hope, and all that, we're fighting right now to have the state relinquish the 710 stump to us in large part so that we can repatriate affordable housing and communities of color that were pushed out of that property when it was originally surplused or seized by the state, rather, some 60 or 70 years ago. We're trying to come up with policy to allow us to make the best use of some 105 Caltrans homes that the state currently owns in Pasadena, again, with a primary goal of using those assets to create more affordable housing. So the last thing we need to do, I think, is to give the wrong impression to decision makers in Sacramento and elsewhere about it. I think we can accomplish the same end result of adopting the ordinance, and I think it seems like a well taken work by our staff, but I would really urge us to strike those portions. And if staff has a different view in terms of necessity, or if there's some essential element of an ordinance like this that requires that kind of language, I'd love to hear it right now.
Mr. Madison, this matter was discussed by me and the city attorney and the city manager and the staff earlier today. And I would turn to the city attorney for a quick response. I think she has some suggested language changes.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Mr. Madison, as the mayor indicated, we did get some comments from members of the public who were concerned about some of the recitals. I would note that the recitals are helpful for the urgency determination findings, such as the six whereas clause that you referenced. And the thinking was initially that because of the city's position, it was helpful to reference that in the recitals. However, as you indicated, it's not required. We did work, and the Assistant City Attorney, Teresa Fuentes, can speak to some proposed revisions that we have that would address the second recital, as well as the third and fourth and fifth recitals, to remove some of that language that you're referencing. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Fuentes.
Thank you. What I want to start with is just to remind the council that before we can adopt this ordinance as an interim urgency ordinance, the council must make a finding that there is a current and immediate threat to public health, safety, and welfare unless we adopt the ordinance. So the whereases, frankly, are written to support that finding. So gutting them completely would undermine the record on that point. Having said that, if it is the will of the council, we have gone through and excised the little bit of language that we think we can, and I'd be happy to go through that. So for example, in the second whereas clause, we could strike the sentence that starts, however, the provisions of SB 9 are likely to undermine blah, blah, blah. So that clause would read, whereas prior to the passage of SB 9 on August 26, 2021, the city of Pasadena submitted a letter in opposition to SB 9, noting that Pasadena is acutely aware of the statewide housing crisis and acknowledges that significant steps must be taken to address housing affordability. The letter also noted that the legislation was being, quote unquote, being undertaken without serious study or consideration of the potential impacts related to traffic, greenhouse gas emissions, air quality, and other environmental factors. The city did not seek to undermine the entirety of SB 9 and its goals, but rather requested that the legislature consider accommodations or exemptions for good actors like Pasadena that would allow us to achieve the same worthy goals of this bill in a manner that is rooted in community participation and thoughtful planning principles. We can strike the last sentence, I'm sorry. And we can strike the entirety of the next whereas clause on page 2 and finish with a statement that simply says, despite the city's expressed opposition, the city is seeking to comply with SB 9. And then on the, what amounts to the, in the fifth whereas clause, we can strike some of that language so that it now reads, whereas pursuant to SB 9, local agencies may adopt objective standards for the mandatory ministerial lot splits and two unit development projects so that the standards take effect before January 1, 2022. Pasadena must act quickly to address the numerous shortcomings of SB 9 through the adoption of such objective standards as set forth in exhibits 1 through 3. And those are the changes that we would recommend because they, by leaving in the language that we do leave in, we do then continue to support that finding, which we must make in order to conduct this as an urgency ordinance, that there is a current and immediate threat to public health, safety, and welfare without the urgency ordinance.
Thank you, Ms. Fuentes, for that suggested language change. Looking back to the council, any comments seeing the changes being proposed by the city attorney? Mr. Kennedy?
Thank you, Mayor, for recognizing me. It is my view that, as already has been stated, we need to remove any adversarial or inflammatory language Not that it is in fact adversarial or inflammatory, but if it gives the impression that it is, for a lot of reasons that Mr. Madison has already stated. But my view is that if we're going to use that kind of language, we need to also have a conversation with our state senator and our assembly person, Chris Holden and Anthony Portantino. So to the extent that our assistant city attorney has addressed all of those, and I think Ms. Fuentes has done that, I think we can move forward in a way where we're making a positive statement, because there's no need at this point to give anything but a positive impression as we move forward to comply with state law. I think Mr. Madison raises a very interesting point that needs to be on all of our radar. It'll take the collective goodwill of this council, headed by our mayor, to ensure that we receive a repatriation of all of the land that was taken, that is known as the 710 stub. And yes, a large, vibrant African-American community was bereft of their land in that area. And part of justice is when you're able to do justice, you do justice. And this council, in my view, is about doing justice. And this is the right move to make those changes, Madam City Attorney and Deputy or Assistant City Attorney, Ms. Fuentes. So I would be in support of the proposed changes, because I think they answer the questions that have been raised about the reading.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Kennedy.
you, Mayor.
We still have some public comment on this matter, but I'll turn next to Ms. Rivas, followed by Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to staff for your presentation. Regarding the proposed interim development standards, I think they are reasonable and appropriate, and so I would support their adoption. And I think, again, it's important to note this is exactly what SB 9 allows room for and is not in any way in conflict with it. So thank you, Cynthia and David, for your comments. I agree with the proposed suggestion, or the suggestion to make some revisions to the recitals. I was wondering if I could get clarification on the two revisions again. I didn't quite catch the first one, and then I wanted to make sure I understood the second one. So sorry if you, you don't have to reread the whole thing, but maybe you could just summarize or highlight what the proposed changes are.
Absolutely, and we're bringing you a red line so you can see it. And then
That's
for
even
those of
better.
the members on the council who are not present, that's why I read it, so that you would understand. So just to be very clear, we're keeping in the language in the second recital that specifically talks about our concern about potential impacts related to traffic, greenhouse gas emissions, air quality, and other environmental factors. Because again, we need those to support the urgency ordinance findings. We can strike reference to the League of California Cities letter, because nothing in there is specific about that public health, safety, and welfare. And then some of the changes in the fourth whereas clause, is it 1, 2, just making sure I'm counting right. In the fifth, actually just seek to get rid of some of the inflammatory language that you all were remarking on.
Thank you, Teresa.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rivas. Vice Mayor Wilson, followed by Mr. Basuda, and then we'll go to public comment.
Yes, thank you. David, and maybe I missed it, I think it was in the presentation, but also, am I correct that the urgency ordinance would preclude lots that went through a lot split and then had duplexes from adding ADUs and secondary ADUs? Is that correct?
For the most part, that's absolutely correct. The intent is to ensure that there's no more than 4 total units created on any one lot.
Yeah, by the way, I tried to go through the ordinance itself, and I couldn't really map where that was called out. So I assume that the city attorney, I find this to be a little bit of a jigsaw puzzle to figure out all those pieces work. I did also want to call out, as Councilmember Madison did, about the aggressive work we've been doing around the missing middle. As you mentioned, there are almost 1,000 new workforce units that are kind of getting adopted and created in the city of Pasadena through our work with a kind of very active JPA. I'll go on record and say I'm disappointed that in terms of page 3, the actions we've taken, that we haven't moved more quickly on the congregational land. I actually had asked that we pick that back up in, I think it was about a year ago. So I echo the community's kind of desire to see what that would be. We really haven't had much conversation here at the city council. I know you wanted to get the housing element or update done first, but it has taken a long time, and I think I'm hopeful that there will be some capacity there as well. I did get correspondence, as you know, District 7 includes Madison Heights, and there's a very energized movement to complete the landmark district that was started right before COVID, the signature collection. As you can imagine, COVID did slow down that process, but they have figured a way to get people to say they're interested online and then actually have people sign. So am I correct, David, when we do landmark districts, as long as it's eligible and being kind of pursued, don't we allow the protections for landmark districts to be enforced during that period?
The local protections, yes, but not the SB9 provisions. We would need to complete that process, and staff is dedicated and has been working with that group to ensure it's moving along.
So I just want to be clear. So would a landmark neighborhood that is been deemed eligible, that's actively collecting signatures, be protected by the SB9 exemption, even though it not be formally instituted as a landmark district?
No, not the SB9. That under state law, that actually has to be an adopted landmark district. But local rules, once we receive the application and go through it, there are some protections that are interim protections that are in place.
So can we add to the local rules so once the application is complete, can we add to the local rules to make sure that the landmark district is protected once the application is complete?
Not from SB9. That's a state law that trumps ours, and the only protection from an exemption is a designated landmark district.
Okay, so we don't have latitude to apply the same logic we have when people are, because right now, if the application is complete, then the protections are kind of deemed to be enforced while it's going through its ministerial process. You're saying that's simply not an option for us?
Right. Only the city's local rules could be enforced, not the state rules. So we'll continue to work closely with Madison Heights to expedite their application.
If I could ask, obviously, that then whatever could be done to accelerate and work with that group to complete in a timely manner. Could I also ask Teresa Fuentes, the city attorney, to opine whether, once again, I trust your judgment, but I know this is an important item to the Madison Heights neighborhood. Are you in agreement with David in terms of there being no ability to achieve some level of protection once the application is complete?
That's correct. State law, since it's very specific on this item, trumps our local regulations.
Okay, well, okay, thank you. Okay, David, please expedite it as you can. I know they're eager to get that completed as soon as possible. Okay, and I am comfortable with the amendments to the ordinance as proposed. I agree. We want to have the proper, public record for this urgency ordinance, but no sense in kicking the hornet's nest. I think having kind of good relations, especially given the 710 stub, which could be transformational to our community, is good good policy and a good approach. So I want to thank Councilmember Madison for flagging that and staff for being responsive. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Masuda, and then public comment.
Thank you, Mayor Gordo. David, just a question right off, just to make sure that we all understand it. SB 9 has nothing to do with affordable housing, is that correct?
SB 9 does not require any level of affordability for new units built.
Okay, I have a lot of energy on parking. I think Mr. Potter said inside 1/2 mile from a transportation site or center, you don't need parking, correct?
That's the state law. That's correct.
You know, when I look on my map here, David, we have 6 transit stations. Are there any other transit sites? Do they use as using that 1/2 mile to restrict parking?
We've not mapped it, but there are under state law, it's not just the Gold Line stops, it's high quality transit stops that are defined in state law. Typically, those would be bus lines that have 15-minute headways so that there's a frequency in terms of the amount and the location of those. So we would map those out. Those are not mapped and sometimes they change. And those are not controlled by the city. Those would be Metro or some other department. But so in addition to the Gold Line, Councilmember Masuda, there may be other high quality transit stops within the city that would qualify for a 1/2 mile radius around them, for which no parking would be required for one of these units that were built.
So the last question is, how are we going to control parking in the neighborhoods?
So existing regulations, you know, first of all, we recognize that people do own cars in Southern California and in Pasadena. So it would be expected that cars would be part of development. And it would be my sense that there would be a desire to provide for parking to make the units viable, because many areas of the city have a prohibition on overnight parking. So that's an existing prohibition that the city has that is not contemplated to be changed by our ordinance this evening, nor was it contemplated to be removed by SB 9.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Masuda. Let's turn to public comment before we turn back. Mr. Kennedy, one quick follow-up, Mr. Kennedy, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Councilmember Masuda asked the question about affordable housing. The legislative intent, correct me if I'm wrong, this is to Mr. Reyes. The legislative intent in the state legislature was to provide this legislation so we could alleviate or help alleviate or start alleviating the lack of affordable housing for those who are unhoused neighbors. Is that not correct?
I think there are two issues. One is to increase the supply of housing. The other is to, I'll say, small a affordable, where the units, because of their size being smaller, would be more affordable than a regular sized unit on a lot within a residential district, and that's statewide. The idea of affordability with respect to what we talk about in terms of low income, very low income, and other sort of deed restricted type of low affordable housing, that's not part of this bill. Again, the bill would contemplate more affordable, smaller case A, affordable housing, because the units that would be created would be smaller.
There's no affordability component to it, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Public comment?
So 2 minutes for public comment, Mayor? Okay, so we will call in Anthony Manousos, followed by Sonia Burnt, followed by Nina Chomsky, followed by Dan Beal, followed by Ed Washatka. So first, Anthony Manousos, *6 to unmute. Anthony. Go ahead.
Hi there. I'm glad we're having this discussion. I agree with David Reyes and others, and I'm grateful that Pasadena has done a much better job than adjacent cities when it comes to affordable housing. I also concur with Councilmember Wilson that there should be some urgency about taking up rezoning religious property for affordable housing. However, I don't see the urgency about responding to SB 9, other than creating reasonable objective standards to ensure its implementation. I don't see how you can say there's a current and immediate threat to the health and welfare of this community by allowing homeowners to split their lots to build a second unit. Since you haven't done an environmental study, how can you allege that SB 9 will adversely affect the environment? It doesn't make sense. As I stated in my letter, I think evidence shows that fears about SB 9 are greatly exaggerated, just like the fears that this council had about ADUs. The Turner study says that SB 9 would enable development of duplexes on only 5.4% of parcels in the state, and most of these would not be developed because of cost and other factors. The impact
45
on
seconds.
Pasadena would be very limited, just like the impact of ADUs. As for affordability, I agree with David Reyes that smaller units on smaller lots will be more affordable and would help the missing middle who are seeking housing they can afford. It could also help people of color and families, most of whom can't afford million-dollar homes in our city. So I hope we will do our best to implement SB 9 in a reasonable way for the benefit of our city. Thank you very much for all your good work.
Thank you. Sonia Burnt, followed by Nina Chomsky, followed by Dan Beal, followed by Ed Washatka.
Good evening. First, I'd like to say that it was great to finally hear staff mention the benefit of SB 9 of more affordable housing in terms of the missing middle and the size of the lot, because there has been so much discussion of fear and nothing about the benefits to a lot of our residents who are struggling can have from SB 9. After reading the city staff response to SB 9 and the emergency ordinance that is being proposed, I felt compelled to write to you again that fears about SB 9 are exaggerated, just like fears that the council once had about ADUs. Some have proposed turning most of Pasadena into historic districts to thwart SB 9, but this is an overreaction that could have harmful consequences. I love the historical character of our city, and I don't see any evidence that SB 9 poses a significant threat requiring draconian action. Many Pasadenans are likely to resent having their homes turned into historical sites and lose the right to build a duplex or even make changes on their homes. Requests for historical status have always come from the bottom up, not imposed from top down. I urge this council to be led by fact, not fear, and to not pick a fight with the state that the city can't win. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to Nina Chomsky, followed by Dan Beal, followed by Ed Washatka, followed by Allison Henry. Go ahead, Nina, 2 minutes. Hello, Nina? We heard you for a second there. All right, we'll come back to you, Nina. We'll take you out and then bring you back in a second. We'll go to Dan Beal.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I'm Dan Beal, representing the West Pasadena Residents Association. I'll be very brief. Wanted to thank the planning and community development and other city staff, the committees and commissions, neighborhood associations, organizations, and the public who've all worked very hard to respond to SB 9. The interim urgency ordinance is an appropriate short-term response. Please adopt it. We can all get to work on the permanent regulations. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's try Nina Chomsky one more time. Nina, can you?
Yeah.
There you go. No, again. Nina, we're having trouble. If you want to call the city clerk's office, 626-744-4124, they can provide you a phone number. You can call in and give your comments. We'll go on to Ed Wishaka, followed by Allison Henry. Ed, go ahead.
Good evening. Can you guys, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Good evening. My comments will be brief because they were mostly focused on changing the extended language that was the change has already been made in the recital. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of Pasadena's Organizing for Progress, or POP, which is a founding member of the Pasadena Affordable Housing Coalition. And now that you've made the changes on the recitals, I would just like to say, please pivot your attitude towards the support of SB 9 and its intention of promoting affordable housing. And I will say that with a small a, as already described. And also please pivot towards agendizing the rezoning changes necessary to permit the building of affordable housing by right on church property. Thank you very much for your support. Good evening.
Okay, we'll call Allison Henry and then hopefully go back to Nina Chomsky.
Great, thank you, Mayor Chomsky. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll also be brief with my remarks. Very grateful to the Council for revisiting some of those whereases to be more conciliatory and more community oriented. I guess I would just lift up that, you know, I understand this is an emergency ordinance. I've, you know, partied late with the Council before on emergency ordinances. And I guess I would just lift up that there are a lot of tenants and folks struggling with their housing in the city that would welcome an emergency ordinance that would be limiting the high rent increases and even additional just cause protections. So as we're thinking about folks with single family properties and wanting to preserve that wealth and integrity, I would urge the Council to consider urgency of protecting Pasadena's renter majority. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll try Nina Chomsky one more time. Nina, you want to unmute? We see that you're unmuted, but we can't hear you in the chamber. I'm not sure what's going on. There will be second reading to the ordinance. You've unmuted again. I don't think she did. So there will be second reading to the ordinance, and you may want to give your comments at that time, or if you want to submit your comments in writing, I will distribute it to the Council. Mayor, Council, that completes public comment on this item.
Okay, but for the technical glitches involving public comment, I think we're ready to take action on this matter. First, approval of the staff recommendation. Is there a motion?
Move it, Mayor.
Moved by
Second.
Mr. Kennedy, second by Vice Mayor Wilson. Roll call.
To
Mayor, does that include the, oh, we'll do that on the ordinance when we get to the changes
That's correct.
Yes.
on 14, excuse me, thank you.
To approve the staff recommendation, Councilmember Hampton?
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilmember Madison?
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda?
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas?
Yes.
Councilmember Williams is absent. Vice Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Mayor Gordo?
Yes.
Motion is approved without opposition.
Now, as it relates to the ordinance matter, and this is item 14, the city attorney has recommended some changes to address the concerns of members of the council and the public revolving around the whereases. So with those changes, I would accept an offer of the ordinance.
I offered it, but I'm fine with the changes.
Okay. So,
Mr. Madison brought it to our attention, and maybe Mr. Hampton and myself could co-second the motion.
Oh, no, I already authored the
Oh, you already
original.
I'll second
Yeah,
Mr.
so I mean, I'm fine with the
No,
changes that have been.
I'll second Mr. Hampton's motion.
no second needed, but we get the intent.
I'm sorry.
And the ordinance is offered as amended here on the floor. Roll call.
So this is an interim urgency ordinance of the city of Pasadena pertaining to construction of multiple dwellings on single-family zone parcels pursuant to Senate Bill 9. To conduct first reading of the ordinance, Councilmember Hampton offered it. Councilmember Hampton? I think that was a yes.
Yes, that was it.
Thank you. Councilmember Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilmember Madison?
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda?
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas?
Yes.
Councilmember Williams is absent. Vice Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Mayor Gordo?
Yes.
First reading of the ordinance has been conducted successfully, 7 in favor, no against.
I'd like to remind the council that we still have public comment for matters not on the agenda. This next item is item 12, and this is consideration of a call for review. And this also has a number of public comment cards. Mr. Clerk, how many cards are there?
Sorry, my last count was somewhere around 18. The city clerk's office also received one letter urging the city council to call for review the planning commission's decision to disapprove conditional use permit number 6918. So it's a minute and a half for the public comment. Do you want to go straight to it, or did you want to have Mr. Madison?
Why don't we go ahead and have Mr. Madison introduce the matter, and then we'll turn to public comment. Mr. Madison?
Certainly, Mayor. This is a project, as I think we all know, that's brought by the applicant is Huntington Memorial Hospital. It's been through quite a bit of work. I think staff could correct me, but I think at the Planning Commission, the staff was in support of the project as it came forward, but apparently the discussion focused mostly on some design issues that have been sort of varying throughout the process and all. Huntington has filed an appeal, but they're certainly an important stakeholder in our city and my district. And I think the appropriate thing to do would be for the council to call it up for review. So that'll be my motion, Mayor.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Madison. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy, for the second. Let's turn to public comment before we take a roll call.
And Mayor, I think it might be helpful for the public to understand that this isn't the time for discussion of the merits. This is the time for just the pure question of whether the city council should call it up for consideration at a future meeting. So the speakers need not get into whether it's a good project or a bad project, but rather just whether it should be called up for review.
Okay, no discussion on the merits, just a whether or not question.
Mayor, I had a question for the city attorney. I saw this was going to come up, and I know my wife's law firm has done work and continues to work as with Huntington as a client. So I think I should recuse myself even from the consideration of the call-up.
That's advisable based on what you're saying.
Okay, so I will drop off.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Wilson. Mr. Clerk?
Thank you. 6:28. Vice Mayor Wilson is off. So we'll start with Sean Silva, followed by Godfrey Wachira, followed by Zach. It's a minute and a half. *6 to unmute, Mr. Silva. Go ahead.
Hello, am I unmuted?
You are. Go ahead.
All right, well, good evening. Thanks for being here so late, and I appreciate all the other conversations and, of course, the salutation to Mr. Dole. My name is Sean Silva, and I'll be speaking as Representative Creed LA this evening. We are speaking because we are opposed to the project. So we opposed the project before on the grounds that a project of this size and importance should not skate by with a categorical exemption from CEQA's mitigatory measures, and we believe this project's potential impacts matter too much to allow that, as we said at the Planning Commission hearing. Now, of course, the project has an even simpler problem, in our view. The project's applicants believe they have done enough outreach to the community, and they understand the concerns of residents and nearby stakeholders. As we heard at the aforementioned hearing, and as we know ourselves being a community-centric group, this is not the case. Whatever health, traffic, and safety impacts may be levied upon the project by experts, in their view, there is still the broader problem that the hospital has shown a single-minded desire to place the medical office building it deems necessary, in spite of the concerns raised by the Planning Commission's members. We do
30
not agree that
seconds.
this project is setting a good precedent by seeking a review at council. We do not agree that they are seeking a review at council. This is a good strategy. Without a commitment to further environmental study, we do not believe this project deserves approval. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We'll go to Godfrey Wachira or Wachira. Godfrey fell off. All right. We'll go to Zach. Samuel Nieto is in the queue, but he's not checked into the meeting. Zach, go ahead. You have a
Good evening, Pastor Zach with Creed here. In Huntington President and CEO Lori Morgan's letter responding to the denial of the proposed project, she references the South Fair Oaks specific plan and attempts to claim that the hospital CUP request falls in line with that document. However, when you look into that document, you begin to understand why the technical faults of the design of the ingress-egress system become a conversation point during the last public hearing, ultimately leading to the smart decision to deny. Chapter 3, subsection 3.2, entitled Public Realm Urban Design Framework Plan, points out some specific points that the developer should reflect on to get some closure on this denial and what to focus on when they redraft the design of this building. And I quote, 1, improvements to the appearance and use of the existing street grid. This design puts extra stress on the street grid. 2, creation of an aesthetically pleasing pedestrian network in public spaces. The pedestrian network is minimized and emergency visitor and staff vehicles are prioritized. 3, creation of a district focused around Fillmore Street and the proposed Fillmore Light Rail Station.
30
While from being
seconds.
a district focused, Fillmore Street's appearance becomes an afterthought at best and a necessary evil at worst. The project as proposed does not fall in line with any of these 3 requirements and should not be permitted until redesigned or moved to a different area of the city. Thank you, City Council and Mayor, for standing behind the Planning Department's decision to deny this project permit request. Thank you and have a good evening. God bless.
Thank you. Samuel Nieto is in the meeting, so we'll bring in Samuel, followed by Daniel Melendez. Mr. Nieto, *6 to unmute. You have a minute and a half. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Samuel Nieto. I'm a local. I'm in opposition to this project as I was at the Planning Commission. This project truly hasn't been transparent as far as I am concerned. I agree with the commissioners. This project needs to go back to the drawing board. Council members, please stand up for the people of Pasadena by not approving the project. Thank you very much.
Daniel Melendez, followed by Desiree Valencia, followed by Hugh Martinez. Mr. Melendez, *6 to unmute. Mr. Melendez, *6 to unmute. Okay, we'll move on to, well, Desiree Valencia is no longer in the meeting. All right, we'll move on to Hugh Martinez. Mr. Martinez, *6 to unmute. Go ahead, minute and a half.
Good afternoon. My name is Hugh Martinez. I'm a resident of the area. I don't know the project.
Mr. Martinez, excuse me, can I interrupt you? You're coming in a little garbled. Are you able to clear your phone and try again?
Is this any better?
Yes, a little bit. Go ahead.
Hi, good evening. I don't know how this project got by so far. It's a large development on scale of community. Uh, I want to recommend that the council ask the developer to do more environmental research before it proceeds. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll go to Ray, followed by David Hanson. Ray, *6 to unmute. Ray, yeah, 1 minute, 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Hey, good evening, everyone. My name is Ray, and I represent Anchor Church in Los Angeles. As a member in the community, my work at Anchor Church focuses on the people who have the greatest need. We uplift them in our church and our community. We are not encouraged by this project's lack of commitment to local hire. Local hire construction settings to us is a gateway up and out of some of life's worst circumstances. It allows our brothers and sisters who are part of the skilled trades a fair chance at some of the opportunities they missed before. It always provides security and stability to people who need steady careers to get back up on their feet. We urge you not to approve this project, to give us a different and better opportunity.
30 seconds.
Better offer a second chance. Excuse me?
30 seconds. Go ahead.
To better offer a second chance, opportunity to improve local workers' lives. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. David Hanson, followed by Danny Osborne, followed by Albert Duarte, and then Scott Jenkins. Mr. Hanson, go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon or evening, rather, members of the City Council. My name is David Hanson. I'm speaking today as a member of UA Local 398. We do not support this project currently. We need projects that support all local workers and our families, and it's absolutely necessary in this economy for us to advocate for more opportunities for our members. Projects that do not consider these benefits are unfortunately not the sort of responsive and truly emeritus projects that should be the norm here or anywhere. Projects that cut commitments to the workforce will undoubtedly cut commitments elsewhere, and it seems the community feels the same as I do. Please do not approve this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Danny Osborne, followed by Albert Duarte. Mr. Osborne, *6 to unmute. Mr. Osborne, *6 to unmute. We'll go on to Albert Duarte, followed by Scott Jenkins, followed by Rudy Rodriguez. Mr. Duarte, *6 to unmute. Go ahead, minute 30 seconds.
Hi, good evening.
Hi.
My name's Albert Duarte, and on behalf of the iron workers, we do not support this project's approval because the applicant, usually a respected community partner, has not worked with us to ensure the construction of their project will include local skilled workforce. As a member of the iron workers, this project means a lot to us. For a project like this, we extend our most sincere wishes that the applicant consider working with reliable contractors to build a project the best way. Unfortunately, it seems as though the Huntington Hospital does not feel the same. They have not committed to any of those provisions, and our entire community will miss out on economic stimulus and truly gainful opportunities. If that's the case, please reconsider before approving this project for the good of Pasadena and
30 seconds.
Thank you.
Applicant wants to know Dr. Morgan.
Yes.
I'm acquiring the queue.
Okay. That was Albert Duarte, right? Okay, sorry about that. I lost my place. Scott Jenkins, followed by Rudy Rodriguez, followed by Rick Garcia, followed by Willie Solarzano, followed by Lori J. Morgan, MD. Mr. Jenkins, go ahead. Minute and a half.
Good evening. I'm here on behalf of the Huntington Hospital. Also, you'll hear from Dr. Lori Morgan and Brad McCoy from the hospital. We request that you call up this denial from the Planning Commission on our CUP application. Some of the details are set forth in the letter that's in your file. We'd like to thank city staff for their very cooperative and supportive work on this project, and otherwise defer my time to Lori and Brad. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Rudy Rodriguez, followed by Rick Garcia, followed by Willie Solarzano, followed by Lori Morgan, followed by Brad McCoy, followed by David Hanson already spoke. Mr. Rodriguez, go ahead, *6 to unmute. *6 to unmute, Mr. Rodriguez. Okay, we'll go on to Willie Solar. Rick Garcia is not on, so we'll go to Willie Solarzano. Mr. Solarzano, can you unmute and give your public comment? Go ahead. We're not hearing you, Mr. Solarzano. We'll move on to, we'll bring you back in a second. We'll go on to Dr. Lori Morgan, followed by Brad McCoy.
I'll have a question for Dr. Lori Morgan, please, Mayor.
Dr. Morgan, go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I'd like to thank the council for considering Mr. Madison's call-up request. I want to thank the city staffers for their work in helping us to deliver a fully code-compliant building for consideration. I did submit a letter to you with further details that's in your packet, and I'm certainly available for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Morgan. Mr. Kennedy, you had a question for Dr. Morgan?
Dr. Morgan, it is not of consideration tonight, but I wanted to give you fair warning that when you return on this matter, it would be helpful to learn about the local community benefits associated with building this particular structure as it relates to local skill workforce. As you already know, in our community, there have been large projects where we have asked of the developer to provide local benefits. Your attorney, Scott Jenkins, is well-versed in what the possibilities could be, because many years ago, he asked me to participate in a development called the Montana. So we would like to know where your stand is and what you're willing to do. And this is not the conversation for tonight. Thank you very much, Dr. Morgan. It's always a pleasure to hear from you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Kennedy.
you. We will bring that information back.
Next.
We'll go to Brad McCoy, and then we'll follow up with Rudy Rodriguez and David Hanson one more time. Mr. McCoy, go ahead. Minute 30.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Wanted to just add a couple comments to what Dr. Morgan mentioned. You know, fundamentally, we're here tonight because we have a 100% zoning compliant, code compliant project. I'd also like to mention there's a couple parallel workflows happening where we've also met with some of the concerned neighborhood groups, and we're also working in tandem on ways that we can find common ground by softening the edges of our project with these groups. And we thank City Council for being open to hear this on appeal.
Thank you. We'll try Rudy Rodriguez one more time, see if he's able to unmute and we can hear him. *6 to unmute, Mr. Rodriguez.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Minute 30, go ahead.
Hello. Hello and good evening. My name is Rudy Rodriguez. I'm a representative on behalf of UA Local 50 Steam Fitters and Refrigeration. We do not support this project as it stands. We urge the applicant to consider the project as a chance to give back to the community, which they envision as the role of a hospital. We encourage the applicant to remember that we build a project and how they build it. Thank you for your time. Stay safe, stay healthy. Happy holidays. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, and we'll take David Hanson one more time. Mr. Hanson, you already spoke, I believe, so we'll take David Hanson. Now, that completes public comment on item number 12.
Thank you. We're left with the issue of the call-up. Other issues have been raised related to the workforce, and using this as an opportunity to develop the workforce, but those are questions for another date. Today, we're looking strictly at the call-up. Mr. Madison has made the motion. Mr. Kennedy seconded the motion. Roll call.
To approve the call for review, Councilmember Hampton,
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Yes.
Councilmember Madison,
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda,
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas,
Yes.
Councilmember Williams is absent, Vice Mayor Wilson. Oh, conflicted, you're right, thank you. Absent, recused. And he left the meeting at 6:28, just to be on the record. Mayor Gordo.
Yes. Yes.
This matter is approved for call-up, 6 in favor, no against.
Thank you. More to come on that issue. I think that completes our public agenda and brings us to more public comment for matters not on the agenda.
We have a minute and a half, that's what we're at. So it's a minute and a half. We have Jasmine Richards Abdullah. Adriana Batista has a card in, but she's not checked in. So if not, we'll go to Karina K. So let's bring in Miss Abdullah. Jasmine, if you can unmute and start your public comment. We'll move on to Karina K, followed by Sheila, followed by Carolyn Galoni. Adrian Bautista still not in the meeting. Karina? Go ahead, you have a minute and a half. Yes, we can.
Thank
Go ahead.
you. My name is Karina. I am a Pasadena resident. You've heard my voice before. I'm also a member of Black Lives Matter Los Angeles, calling in yet again, as other callers have earlier in this call, to uplift the demands to fire the officers who killed Anthony McLean. I want to implore you all as a council to not only see yourselves as administrators and paper pushers and check writers, and actually be representatives of your constituents, not what you think we want, but hear our demands and actually implement solutions to them. The amount of deaths that happens in the city of Pasadena is extremely telling of your laziness, and is extremely just telling of the fact that you don't want to deal with systemic issues. So people dying because of traffic issues, don't send more police to enforce that, please. Deal with the systemic issue of failed streets and systems. Deal with the systemic issue of your police department.
30 seconds.
Who have rabid officers who chase down Black men through cars, weaving through cars, chase them down and shoot them in the back. Deal with that before you're paper pushing. Fire the officers. Cynthia Kurtz, we would like you to hold the police department accountable and not wait endlessly for them to do an investigation that they're not doing. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll bring in Sheila, followed by Carolyn Galoni, and then we'll circle back to Jasmine Richards Abdullah. She's no longer there? Okay. So Sheila, followed by Carolyn Galoni, followed by Julia R. Is Sheila there? All right. Julia's not there? Correct. Simboa Wright? Eddie Portillo? Kyle Johnson. All right, Gary Peters. Jose Munoz. All right, we'll bring in Jose Munoz. *6 to unmute, Mr. Munoz.
It's Jose Munoz.
Yes, go ahead.
Hello, City Council Mayor, the City Manager, Cynthia Kurtz. I'm calling in regards to, I work for the city. I work for the trash department. And I'm calling in regards for negotiation for our contract. It just seems like it's not going anywhere, and what you guys are offering is really embarrassing. As you guys know, the pandemic hit us all. After the COVID-19 started, we've been nonstop work. There's been so much work. As you know, people are staying home. There's more trash, there's more recycling, there's more yard waste. And unfortunately, as we try to negotiate, it just doesn't seem like we're getting any type of respect.
30 seconds.
What you are offering us is really a slap in the face. And as a city, I'm hoping that you guys will look at the numbers and to treat us fairly at the end of the day, because a 0.5% raise is really a slap in the face. And I'm hoping that you guys really think about this. And Cynthia, I'm hoping that as you're the new manager, that you really, really think about what a 0.5% will do for you or the rest of the people. I would really appreciate you guys really putting some thought into it and give us the respect that we owed.
Mr. Munoz, your time has expired. Thank you. Let's try Jasmine Richards Abdullah. Jasmine, are you there? There you go.
Yeah, I'm here.
Minute 30, go ahead.
Okay. Cynthia Kurtz, you're the stand-in city manager. The ball is in your court now. We're asking you to fire Edwin DuMcGuindon, who's an officer that killed Anthony McLean. Also fire Matthew Griffin, who killed Kendrick McDade. I've had several run-ins with Matthew Griffin, and nothing has changed about him. He's still the arrogant murderer that he's always been. Also, we've been asking the community oversight, police oversight board. We want you guys to change their scope. They can't do anything, and we need you guys to readjust their scope. I have some demands for you guys right now, though. The first demand that we're asking you guys to do, this is Black Lives Matter Pasadena. We're asking you guys to put these officers on a yearly annual psychiatric evaluation. Why? Because we know that these officers are crazy out here and they need some help. And we also would like you guys to do an annual drug test. As far as the last community oversight, police oversight
25 seconds.
meeting, we found out that some of those officers was high when they killed Reginald J.R. Thomas. They were off substances, and by substances, we're talking about steroids, talking about coke, talking about those type of things. So you guys need to test these officers, put it inside the policy. We need to change the policy, and that's what we're asking for right now. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll bring in Adriana Bautista, followed by Gary Peters, followed by Julie Martinez. Ms. Bautista, *6 to unmute. There you go. Minute and a half.
Hello, I would also like to echo demands for City Manager Cynthia Kurtz to fire Officer Edwin DuMcGuindon, along with Ronald Serrano and other officers involved, including Officer Duncan, who recovered a gun from the scene, which PPD has yet to release any statement or evidence, surveillance camera footage, body cam footage of the gun being retrieved on the scene. Regarding the Oversight Commission, Deputy Chief Moody shared with the committee that that PPD is waiting for the criminal investigation to be fully completed in order for the administrative investigation to be commenced.
25
This
seconds.
is a blatantly terrible policy to uphold. And in fact, OIR's recommendations in past murders of Black men in Pasadena have recommended for PPD to do the investigations concurrently at the same time. So this should be put into policy immediately. More time equals more room for error.
Ms.
more
Bautista, your
room
time has
for-
expired.
Okay, so for the administration investigation to be done immediately.
Thank you. Gary Peters, followed by Julie Martinez. Gary Peters fell off. Julie Martinez.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Minute 30, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Police in California have a serious problem with deadly force. In California alone, we had more shootings than any other state in the nation. The city of Pasadena has a serious problem with the profiling of the Black community by racial profiling them. It is time for justice for Anthony McLean and for his family. Those officers, any officer involved needs to be fired immediately. It's unacceptable. We expect so much more from Pasadena leadership. This is the town that produced Jackie Robinson, who broke the color barrier. What is wrong? The disappointment in our city council and the chief of police and the city manager for not addressing the systemic racism that other police departments and other government agencies throughout the entire nation are reckoning with. Why are we lagging so far behind?
30 seconds.
Pasadena police have a reputation for killing Black folks and for targeting people of color. This needs to end. Stand up, be bold. The moment is now. Meet the moment and act accordingly and fire the officer who murdered Anthony McLean and shot him in the back. Thank you.
Thank you. That completes public comment on matters not on the agenda. Mayor, we have 2 public comment speakers for matters on the closed session agenda, and we can get to, do you want to take them now? All right.
Before we get there,
Okay.
I
Sorry.
have a quick question.
Mr. Kennedy, quick question.
Thank you, Mayor. To the city manager, I remember when I was deputy chief of police in Richmond, we had a random drug policy, not only for, like, let me repeat that, random drug policy testing program for employees, all employees, and also a more rigorous one for public safety personnel. Is there something similar taking place in the city of Pasadena?
Councilmember Kennedy, I can only speak from history, and I will have to check what the rules are today. In the past, we didn't have a random testing policy, but we had a policy that any employee that we're concerned might have any substance of any type abuse on, especially tales of it while being on work, did have to take a test. But as to just having random tests on an ongoing basis, if the council would allow, I would be glad to check with the Human Resources Department and return with a more complete answer.
It's unfair for any of staff to have to talk and no one can hear them. And that's been going on from the beginning of the meeting. There are times in which staff is talking and you cannot hear them. And that is, it was more prevalent in that moment when City Manager Cynthia Clerk was speaking. So I suppose I and other members of the council who are remote did not hear her last part of her comment.
I'm Need to learn to be more apt with this mic, and I do apologize, Councilmember Kennedy.
I don't think it's the mic.
I think I
think
wasn't
it's
leaning
something
in far enough. I think it was
Okay.
me.
Okay.
So I do not know of the current policy. In the past, we did not have a random testing policy, although employees that were suspected of having any substance use on the job were required to submit to a test. So let me check on the current policy today and return to the full council with a more complete answer.
Thank you very much.
We can do that in the form of a memorandum. Mr. Hampton?
I was going to ask a similar question to Councilmember Kennedy's as it relates to substance use of substances, and do we have not a random? I think that everybody should be tested quarterly. I mean, we are testing our employees for COVID regularly. We should be testing them to see if there are any employee, not just police department, but any employee that is working for the city should have testing, because I think that as part of the requirement, at least last time I looked at employment, you have to have a test going in to get your job. So that should stay relatively the same as long as it's substance abuse, steroids, methamphetamines, etc. And so I think that we should really look at the policy as a whole. And so hopefully when city manager comes back with that report, we look at it for all employees, because that's really important. Trash truck drivers, etc., should not be under the influence. And then as far as psych evaluations, which was brought up, and I brought it up in public safety before, are psych evaluations something in public safety annual, or is it just you get a psych evaluation before you get the job, and then after that it's there's no more? That's a question.
I will return if I have incorrect information, but I would be very surprised that annual psychological evaluations are required of any employees, including our police officers. But I will check and get back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hampton. I think that completes our public agenda, and it's now time to turn to closed session, and we have two public commenters on closed session. Mr. Clerk?
Thank you, Mayor. The City Council will convene in the virtual meeting to discuss closed session items A, B, and C on today's agenda. An opportunity is provided at this time for public comment on the closed session items. We have two speakers, Heavenly Hughes and Alan Shea, for closed session items. We will start with Heavenly Hughes, please. And it's for 2 minutes, Ms. Hughes.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
I'm going to talk about Agenda C, which is in regard to public employee performance. First off, I'm glad that this was just brought up recently about drug tests and the mental evaluation. I know Attorney Kerry Harper said that when there's an officer-involved shooting, it should automatically be a drug test administered immediately with police officers involved with that shooting, and also a mental evaluation done immediately. To hear that there is nothing in place brings us back to why it's so important for us to get this OIS policy on the agenda, as I've heard Mayor Victor Gordo and Tyrone Hampton mention that it will be in January. Mayor Victor Gordo, just as easy as it was for you to speak earlier to me, it's just that easy to apologize to the community for derating, dismissing, and humiliating the community callers who have consistently called in over a year to fire Officer Edwin Dumagwendon and all officers involved with the cover-up and murder of Anthony McClain. Cynthia Kirk, I have called in for many, many months demanding the city to say something. We always want the community to say something. We all need you all to say something and do something about police violence in our community. Mayor Victor Gordo targeted and attacked me, a woman, for addressing police accountability. That's part of the performance evaluation that I hope you guys are discussing today. Do not move on when it comes
10 seconds, sorry.
disciplinary action. When it comes to taking disciplinary action in the murder of Anthony McLean, we would also like to know the details of the officer-involved shooting that happened on November 23rd. Has that information been put out? My understanding that a young Black man was shot and killed on the east side of Pasadena. We see often that when white men shoot and kill.
Ms. Hughes, your time has expired.
I'll finish this one point. It is very important that accountability is on both sides. We see white men who do mass shootings walk away from the scene and apprehended without being killed. We want to know why the Black man was killed on November 23rd in the officer-involved shooting. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan Shea, *6 to unmute. You have 2 minutes. Go ahead, Alan.
Thank you, Mayor Gordo and City Council members. I hope that in your closed session that based on the authority and the power under California Code 54957, that you exercise the discussion to fire all officers involved with Anthony McLean's shooting, because this code gives you the authority to review claims of employees. And I hope that this is one of the things you do, especially with our new interim city manager, Cynthia, and I've followed Cynthia for years. I think she's incredible, and I hope that she continues to move forward with that same type of passion that we used to see years ago that we need here in Pasadena now. So I hope to see that in closed session and get some good results for next week's city council meeting, so that it will take the stress community and the community can really start to heal with putting the Anthony McLean's chapter behind them. Thank you.
Mayor and council, that completes public comment on the closed session.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So the council will now recess into closed session, and we'll begin with item A. Yeah, we'll hear items A, B, and C, but we'll start with item A. Thank you.
So we'll ask the council members to connect to the closed session via the link provided, and we'll pick that up at 7:10, 7:06.